Welcome to P12 Assessments inside the Forging Players series. Your guides inside the P12 video series will be Brian Bailey from the United States and Gareth McShay from Ireland, both of which have countless years of experience training juniors to touring professionals inside of putting and short game. So it's time to learn what P12 is.
Hi, I'm Gareth McShay. Welcome to our P12 video. In this video, we are going to explain what P12 is, give you a concept around proximity, the different lie conditions you will encounter as you're attempting to strike a P12, and also the distances involved. We will also, at the end of this video, provide some extra content, and we really hope you enjoy this series.
Why is P12 so important? Well, we're going to break down P12 into two main components. As you progress through the Forging Player series, we'll introduce something called P6, which is just like P12, but cut in half. 12-foot diameter or a 6-foot radius around the hole. And what I've done here is I've actually broken down and shows you P12 total, which is the blue line. The orange line is actually 7 to 12 feet. And then the red line is actually your P6. So here's probably one of the most interesting graphs you'll ever see is what does an emerging player do as well as a touring player? They average about 20% P12 for that 7 to 12 foot distance, which is kind of shocking. Where do they separate? Well, the tour player averages close to 60% of hitting him 6 feet and in, but where the emerging player does that less than 20%.
Fascinating graph, Brian. And I think it's fair to say none of us would have predicted this before this graph was produced. This really caught us, off guard. We're like, hold on, are the numbers right? Is the data right? We didn't anticipate this at all.
When we actually ran this about 12 different times in 12 different ways to make sure that this was correct. Because again, intuitively, it didn't make sense to us. But again, if you look at your overall percentages, again, a developing player is 50%, tour player is, getting close to 80%. For total P12s, that's 12 feet all the way in. But when we actually segment the two out, again, it flattens at about 20%. If you think of all of this inside of training and how to get better and setting expectations, you've got to understand what is expected from different distances, different lies, and here's the numbers that we need to be shooting for.
Right, and we're going to put our focus for the rest of these slides on P12. P6 will feature, it's just not going to feature in this series.
Proximities to the hole inside of chipping. What we call P12 is our first endeavor inside of chipping inside of the Forging Players series. That means when I miss the green in regulation, how often do I chip the ball or strike the ball within 12 feet of the hole? So if you think of a big diameter around the hole, you actually have a 24-foot circle to put the ball in. So that is what we call P12. Below, we list all the levels of the Forging Players series and standards or expectations for you to be able to hit P12. And what you come to find is at the developing stage, which is really starting to shoot in the upper 80s, we're looking at 50% of your shots have to be within 12 feet. So inside of training, that gives you a great premise to kind of build from.
I think it's important, Brian, that, as you say, P12, it's 12 feet distance, 24-foot diameter circle around the cup. And that will help people manage expectation as they're developing their games, an emerging game, developing player, even going into proficient players. What is a reasonable expectation for me around the green from different lie conditions as well? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
This is just a good understanding that shows that there is a growth from a player that's shooting in the 90s, an emerging player, all the way to a tour player that's roughly hitting P12 close to 80% of the time. So every time that they chip, roughly 8 out of 10 of those will be inside of 12 feet. And if you watch any golf on the weekends, you can definitely see that those guys and gals do not leave many shots outside of 12 feet. So let's look at some of the main lies that we're going to talk about inside of the series and inside of GameForge. We have our fringe lie, which is our first cut of grass just off the green. So when you miss a green, but barely. We have a fairway lie. That is a height of a mown fairway. We have intermediate, which is kind of longer than fairway, but not really deep rough. But inside of GameForge, a lot of times we'll intermingle fairway and intermediate together because the percentages are so similar that a lot of times we don't separate. What is rough? Well, you know rough when you see rough, right? It's deep, thick grass around a green. And then, of course, a bunker is a sand trap. So these are our common lies. The beauty of this is we're going to go through and define each one of these by expectations from distance and lie condition and show you what your P12 should be. So as we can see in this graph, this would be your fairway lie, which is your most common lie inside of chipping around the green. Most people think it's rough, sand traps, and so on, but really the fairway lie condition is the number one chipping zone inside of short game. So as you can see here, what do we have? A learning player's you should be hitting roughly 35-40% of shots inside of 12 feet, and where a tour player is going to get that number up about 80%. So again, that kind of gives you expectations on what is good.
We want players to become proficient here because this is a good lie condition. The ability to control the golf ball off the shorter grass is key. And when you get this lie, we want you able to capitalize upon it.
You think of Moneyball of golf. How can I get better faster? If this is a lie condition I have the most on average, this is a lie condition I need to train the most. And again, become proficient here because a majority of your shots and majority of your up and down opportunities will come from here.
And Brian, it's key to say as well, because it's on fairway, there's predictability to how the ball will behave versus coming out of different conditions. So that's why we really feel that this is an opportunity for players.
So we have a fringe condition, which is just off the green. And again, you can see as a tour player, they're looking at 90% of these shots or 95% of these shots being within 12 feet. Again, a developing player, about half your shots. So fringe would be just off the green. Again, should be an area you can control. You have a variety of options to be able to perform and hit different shots. But really, the fringe is an area that you need to be highly proficient in hitting your P12 number.
A lot of the time, we would expect to see players, perhaps if it's closely mown fringe grass, which would be a level just above green height and below fairway height, that is ripe for putting, and that is why we feel it is an area where players can become very adept very quickly.
Now we're going to take a look at the greenside bunker. Again, a developing player is actually falling back. 50% is kind of their average, but you can see coming out of the bunker, they're looking more in the 40% range, where a Tour Pro is looking at a P12 at 75%. We've changed the lie condition. Greenside bunker has really affected proximities. Understanding that a 10-yard bunker shot does not equal a 10-yard chip shot from the fairway on expectations. Inside of golf, what you've got to start to do is learn to manage expectations by distance and lie condition and have a true understanding of what is expected. Bunker
shots, the only time in golf where you can miss the ball on purpose. There's scope to get pretty good at these guys. I think there's a lot more leeway in terms of becoming a reasonable bunker player than people realize. And it's an area where they tend to just want to extract and move on. We believe within GameForge, this is an area where people can really make strides.
And I think this is probably the one graph that really grabbed me when I put this together. I actually went back again last night and made sure that my numbers were right. So you can see that the player performs almost as well out of the rough as they do the fairway. A tour player is looking at 75% opposed to 80%. But again, you can see that developing player is just a nudge below 50%. So you can see even out of rough conditions, there is a high expectations to be able to hit P12. A lot of people think once I'm in the rough, kind of everything kind of blows up and it's really difficult. No, the numbers show that you need to still be performing P12 at a high rate, and especially as you're moving through the Forging Player Series.
A lot of players like that little bit of grass around the golf ball, the concept that you can get the club onto the ball a little bit easier. This is maybe an area where players just feel a little bit more comfortable. I know I've seen that as I'm coaching. The tight lies and the fairways and fringe can be sometimes a bit, can throw players a bit. In the rough, they feel like they can have a bit of more of a swing and can get a little bit more loft. So these are the three distances we're going to focus upon. We'll begin at the cup, and so from 0 to 10 yards to the pin is our first distance. 10 to 20 yards, intermediate distance, and then we have 20 to 30 yards to fill out the final distance. These are where we see players finish most often, and this is where we're focusing upon as we talk to you about P12.
So what we were able to do is take each lie condition and actually show you what you do by distance. So we create what we call distance bends, where we break it into 10-yard segments, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. And the one thing you need to know as a golfer is the zone. We talked about the fairway lie condition was the number one lie condition. Well, the average bend position that you will be chipping from is actually 10 to 20 yards. So inside of training, just make sure you focus on that 10 to 20 zone. That's your highest density of shots around the green. So as we take a look here at fairway lie condition, we actually break it down by the different zones and expectations. So as we add distance, we add difficulty. And that means as that difficulty grows, our proximities actually change. So you can see that there's a steady growth from learning to tour player of getting better. You can see the linear look between the different distances. So again, understanding expectations from distance and lie condition really make up what a good shot around the green is.
Also, Brian, and this is very important for the player who's training, you have to know where you should be training the most so that you're maximizing the benefit you derive from any training. And as Brian has just pointed out, 10 to 20 yards from a fairway lie, that is the most likely shot you're going to experience over a course of a round of golf. We want you doing the majority of training in that area.
So now let's take a look at the P12 bunker. Inside of the fairway conditions, you saw at 10 to 20 to 30, there was a linear look to it. There was a good separation. Out of the bunker, it gets a little muddled, right? Everything's kind of shoved together. And this is actually where you see the 10 to 20 zone, you actually outperform closer bunker shots. A lot of the reason for that is there's not a lot of greenside bunkers that are 0 to 10 yards. Majority of bunker shots are actually 10 to 30 yards around the green. So again, that is why we're seeing this number of 10 to 20 kind of elevating above. So this is a kind of a neat graph that shows that performance-wise, out of the bunker, everything just kind of gets cinched together and it's just not as clear on one level to the next.
Right, and it shows us that really, if you're going training, 10 to 30 yards is what you want to be training. That's the area where you're most likely to face in the golf course. And it's sometimes I find, Brian, when I go to practice areas or other clubs, the bunkers are on top of the greens. They are in that 0 to 10 range, which means the players aren't getting to train in an appropriate manner.
So the next lie condition and distance we're really going to look at inside of P12 is out of the rough. 10 to 20 is the most common out of the rough. And this is, as a proficient player, someone that's shooting in the low 80s, is really starting to be able to hit at about a 75% clip. So out of the rough, you're really starting to see from 10 to 20 yards, 7 to 8 shots out of 10 should really enter that P12 category. So again, these are just starting to give you expectations inside of training and also expectations on the golf course of how to manage mentally what a good shot is and accept what happened and then be able to make a putt and move on.
It also does show us, Brian, that players are doing a pretty good job in this lie condition. They're not far off tour standard once you get into a proficient player and above. So there's a lot. I mean, all players really are doing a pretty good job once we get to developing and beyond. Over 50% of shots from all lie conditions or from all distances are within the P12 range.
Inside of this P12 assessment, we have a common lie and distance. You can see Gareth McShay is hitting out of the bunker, and then Brian Bailey on the bottom is hitting chip shots from 10 to 20 out of a fairway lie. And if I have to say so, doing a masterful job of hitting multiple different types of shots into his P12. We've given you expectations for the bunker player, as well as the expectations have changed from the fairway. When you're done with the assessment, record the total P12s for all 10 shots from your lie and distance inside of GameForge or your performance journal. Inside of GameForge, you'll see tons of assessment variations by lie only. So I'm going to move randomly in the rough from basically all different distances, but I'm really worried about just the lie. By distance, I'm going to hang out in a distance bin, 10 to 20 yards, let's say, and I'm going to hit from fairway, bunker, fringe, intermediate rough. So again, just kind of playing around inside that distance bin. We also have the ability to target a distance and lie together. So I could say I'm going to hit shots only from 10 to 20 from the rough because I see my numbers are low there. And then we have what we call density, which is where your shots come from. And the last assessment I'm going to show you will really highlight density. This is based off the average GameForge player in the system. It's actually a 12-ball challenge. This assessment is one of my favorites inside of GameForge. It really simulates what conditions of chip shots you have during a round. I call it just simply the 12-ball assessment for P12. So you're just going to randomly drop balls under these conditions from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 30. And again, we highlight those zones because those are the most common zones for being able to save P6 and P12. You're going to chip to the hole simply, and then you're going to record how many shots were inside of P12. And here are some of your expectations by group. Learning player, we'd hope for 40% P12, or roughly 5 out of 12. Emerging player, 50%, 6 out of 12 inside of P12. Same with proficient player, 50%, 6 out of 12. At advanced player, we start moving again to 60%, or 7 out of 12 shots. Elite player is up to 70%, and a tour player is really going to be pushing 80, or roughly 9 out of 12 shots inside of P12. So this is a great drill to make you, yes, there are bunker shots. But you can see this is a great drill that makes you think and work on where is my game. Of course, when you're done, record your score inside of GameForge. On behalf of Brian Bailey and Gareth McShay, we want to thank you for joining us in this Forging Player Series, P12, all about proximities and short game. Make sure you're in the lookout for more videos inside of short game and the Forging Player Series to help you score better. Thank you, and I wish you the best of luck in reaching your next level. This has been a Fuel production.